Hi, Mr. Ng.
Hello, good
Hi,
evening.
how are you? Good evening. So you're wearing
Too
your
bad.
party colors at home as well?
No, it's not party colors. It's Nisun East colors.
Okay.
No party logo.
Okay, all
And
right.
as I said in the video, I really
Right.
just wear this every day.
Yeah, I watched the video and that was fascinating.
Life
So
is easy.
firstly, yes. So
Don't
firstly,
need to
thanks
choose. Yep.
for doing this live. It's your first
No
live, right?
worries. First
Yep.
Instagram live.
Right. Okay. So so thanks. I'm honored that you chose to do that with me, and I think there are many issues to discuss. But
Yep.
firstly, before we begin, I think I would just like to thank you for really championing, being a voice of the voiceless a lot of times in Parliament. So I just wanted to put that on the table. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your works. The first, I think there's only one place to start: second-hand smoking. What's up with that?
Well, that has been a long battle. I think over the last 3 years, I've been raising this issue of secondhand smoke. And not just that, about increasing the minimum legal age for smoking, about increasing the list of prohibited areas. So there's been a whole series of PQs, bill speeches that led up to this motion that I filed for September. Well, for October, sorry.
All right.
I filed it in September, but it really also is timely now because, as you saw from the last PQ reply, the number of cases that's gone to the CMC on secondhand smoke is actually quadrupled. And it's an issue now because everyone's working from home. So instead of smoking in your office place and you being at work, everybody's at home now and everybody is facing these effects of secondhand smoke.
Right.
And as I shared in the motion, I think the key thing now is we have to move away from viewing this as a neighbourly dispute, but really as a public health crisis. Every day, someone in Singapore dies because of secondhand smoke, and that's something that we need to tackle.
Right. So I was watching the speech earlier in full, and I came in agnostic, but I was somewhat persuaded by your argument. Although the one caveat I would have, or the one concern I would have, is your argument seems to rest on the premise that since we already have a lot of state intrusion in our homes, why not have an additional level or layer of state intrusion? Don't you think that this is what leads to the nanny state mindset that Singaporeans have? Every problem should be solved by the government?
Absolutely not. And I'm one of those that push in Parliament about how we have too much legislation. But in the case of secondhand smoke, so whatever that SMS Amy had talked about, those we really tried all those methods. And if you look at my Facebook page, all the comments, you realize that people have really exhausted everything that the three-prong approach that she mentioned, and they're still facing this secondhand smoke. And someone just emailed me last night to say that she actually moved house. So she did what I said most people don't do. She moved house. Unfortunately, she moved to another area where, again, it's secondhand smoke. So it was unfortunate for her, but there's another lady that tried to go upstairs and give a box of chocolate to tell the smoker, please don't smoke at the window.
Wow.
Even that didn't work, and the fellow continued, and her son is suffering from asthma, and that really affects him. So there's nothing much they can do now. But what I'm pushing for is not to point and be intrusive cameras into your rooms or into your house, and that's why I'm pushing for, let's just stop the smoking at the windows and the balconies. And we can point the cameras sort of upwards at an angle where you will just see someone smoking at the window. So if you sit down on your sofa or lie down on your bed, as I shared in Parliament, and you smoke, the cameras won't pick it up. And I think that's where we can sort of draw the line and have a middle ground now. So smoke in your homes, but make sure that the smoke sort of doesn't affect your neighbour. And as I mentioned, this is not a perfect solution. All it does is it minimises the effects of secondhand smoke, not eliminate. And I think for many, again, you look at the Facebook comments, they will be very happy if we can just take that one step forward for now.
Right. So that would be one side of the argument, one side of the response, right? The other side would say, why not go all the way and ban smoking altogether?
So I always believe in finding the middle ground. And as I shared, the rights of smokers should be protected. And they're adults, old enough to decide whether you want to smoke. And that's why I give the example of me. When I smoked for 17 years, I loved it. But I gave it up because I didn't want my daughter to be affected by secondhand smoke.
Right.
I'm not sure you can hear a daughter that's crying in the background.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's always lovely to hear children in the background. So I also share something with you. I also quit smoking a few years ago, many years ago. But it was for
Okay.
myself. It wasn't for my son or daughter.
Either way, it
Yeah.
works.
So yeah. But I appreciate it. I personally was surprised at the amount of support you actually got online. I thought, I mean, you got a lot of vitriol online as well, but I thought you would get more vitriol than support. But it seems like you got more support online. So, so thanks for elucidating your stance on that.
I mean, again, you look
Yeah.
at the comments, you realize this. It really is an issue that people are affected by.
Right.
This is something that we, again,
Right.
it is not a dispute. They worry about their health and their lives. We have to
Right.
speak up for that.
Right. So a questioner asked based on this, and then we'll move on to the next issue, is that once you have such cameras, right, then the worry is that the cameras would be used for something else, even though the initial purpose is noble. But that's how state surveillance usually increases, right? And then the next problem, people call for more state intervention or state surveillance. So how do we find that? Because you're about the middle ground. So how do we find that middle ground for that particular problem?
So the middle ground has already been addressed with our optical cameras that we use now to catch high-rise littering. So those images are viewed by only selected people. Again, it's pointing at the facade of the building, so not into your homes. And the images are deleted once there's no enforcement action that needs to be taken. So again, I always feel there isn't an either-or.
Right.
The truth and the solution always lies in the middle. And I think that's
Right.
the middle ground now.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. So we'll move on to inequality, because I think that's a good segue here, because there's also an unintended problem of inequality, right? It's almost the signal is, if you live in a bungalow, you've earned the right to smoke in your own home. But if you are not rich enough to live in a bungalow, no, I'm sorry, you cannot. So that's a segue to the problem of inequality. Do you think there is an issue with our understanding of meritocracy?
No, but maybe back to that smoking one last time.
Yeah, sure, no problem. No
So
problem.
the call is for private apartments as well. So even those living in $1 million condos.
Yes.
And that's the example I raised on the chocolates. That's actually a condominium.
Right. I understand. You didn't make that distinction. So I think I want to be clear.
And I think that's important.
Right. So Mr. Ng didn't make the distinction, but my worry is this is gonna disproportionately affect people in the HDBs and condos as well. So I'm not sure whether there are studies in Singapore on income levels and smoking, and whether it's related to financial stress and all that. And maybe there's another added layer of this issue.
I haven't looked into that part.
Right. I don't know as well. So. Right. Yeah. So, is there an issue with how we understand meritocracy?
I don't think so. I mean, meritocracy exists in Singapore, but of course there are some obstacles, which is what I've been pushing in Parliament to remove. One example is streaming. So it is meritocracy, but unfortunately through PSLE, we've put all those lower income into one stream, the middle income into another stream, and the higher income into another stream. So meritocracy is there, but sometimes it's hard to fight and get your way up. And that's why I think we need to make sure we address those obstacles.
Right.
And that's what we've done with streaming. You know, I focused hard on that because again, I wanted to make sure that meritocracy can thrive here. And through a parliamentary question, I realized that the reply was that PSLE scores are positively correlated to your socioeconomic status.
Right.
And based on PSLE scores, you are streamed into normal tech, normal acad, and express. And so you then get this social stratification that we saw happening over the last few years because of streaming, and I'm very glad that we have abolished it now, and there's more social mixing, and I think meritocracy can thrive in our schools as well.
Right. So, and I think that was definitely a good decision by the government. I mean, made possible by people yourself and Minister Ong as well. So that is only one aspect of inequality, right? The PSLE.
Yeah. What many about aspects?
Right. So what about inherited meritocracy then? Because a lot of us, our station in life a lot of it is due to our parents' station in life. So how do we get around that? A pure meritocracy, pure meritocratic system wouldn't work, right?
So that's our focus is not to cap the top, but to try and bring the bottom up. And that's why we have started a variety of programs, Kickstart, kifas, all the subsidies for the lower income to make sure they also have, well, opportunities for education. We make sure that every school is a good school, and I wholeheartedly believe in it. So the focus is on meritocracy, but not capping the top, and how we can bring the bottom up. And I think again we're focusing on that now, even with not just education system, but all the subsidies that you see, to make sure everyone has a fair chance. Are we at the ideal state yet? Obviously not. And you know, the other part I brought up was gender inequality as well.
Right.
So there is meritocracy, but the reality is that women have smaller opportunities and even smaller wages, down to workplace discrimination and the gender wage gap.
Right. I mean, even at the start, there's already a wage gap, right, because of national service.
Yep,
right. But
part of it is
then the counter to that would be that the boys lost 2 years, that the girls were ahead 2 years. But I don't know how we can adequately solve that. Yeah.
We have even the adjusted wage gap, for example, where you factor in the experience and all that, there is still a gap.
Right. Yes.
I think women earn, if I'm not wrong, $352 less last year as compared to men for the same job and same amount of experience. And a lot of it is really the gender stereotype that women are supposed to look after the kids, men are supposed to go to work. It's 2020, it really is time for us to move away from that.
Right. And I think based on your parliamentary intervention earlier, you believe that work from home is actually a way to overcome that gender inequality, right?
It is, and I think there are some studies now that have done because of this COVID-19 pandemic on what is its effect on gender inequality. And it shows that it's helped because it's given us men the chance to be at home, to help with the child caregiving duties. It sort of balanced the scale a little bit. And you know, someone wrote to me last night and said she's very happy now because, whenever she picks up her kid from primary school, she sees a lot more fathers picking up their kids now, because they're able to and they're working from home. And I think that, again, not just tackles inequality, but it changes the mindset that actually it's men and women that can look after the children, and hopefully then that changes the employer mindset.
Right. And I just wanted to say the gender pay gap is a worldwide problem, right? So I think we have to creatively and look at how other countries have tackled it as well. So the work from home thing, there's also a class element here, right? Because not everybody can work from home, and usually the lower income people are less likely to be able to work from home, right? So to rely on that probably is gonna exacerbate some other form of inequality. What do you think?
No. So what I've pushed for is the work from home from those who can, and then make sure that we increase the annual leave entitlement for those who can't. And that's what I've pushed for, because I think if you look worldwide now, Singapore has one of the lowest minimum entitlement for annual leave at 7 days. I delivered a speech on all that. There are many other countries that give more, and I said exactly what you have just said, that this will help the lower income, the essential workers who cannot work from home, and will really rely on the annual leave entitlement to take a break and to rest. So fighting on that ground as well, and fighting for childcare leave as an example. Again, I've pushed that not everyone can have flexible work arrangement. How do the nurses, how do the cleaners have flexible work arrangement? But they have to work on site. So the childcare leave entitlement is important, especially important for them, where they need to take time off to look after their children.
Right. Okay. Thanks a lot, Mr. Ng, for that. So still, I think this is related to inequality as well. The Parti Liyani case, right? Maybe it's about how Singaporeans view foreign domestic workers or even foreign workers. We really have to think about our approach as a whole, especially after the pandemic, right? So what are your thoughts on the Parti Liyani case? Is it about inequality? Is it systemic inequality, or is it bias? What is it?
So the answer is you have to wait for the review and for the ministerial statement in November.
I'm sure you have some thoughts on it. Yeah.
So I'll share with what I raised in Parliament, that I do think that part of the way we can help is to make sure they come under the appropriate adult scheme. So foreign domestic workers. And that's basically a scheme for the vulnerable, where during police interviews, they have someone to accompany them. And I think Parti Liyani would have benefited from that. There's issues of whether she understood the language, understood what she was signing. But I think someone there to support her during this interview process would be important. And I mean, as a government, we recognize they are vulnerable already. That's why we amended the penal code to increase the penalties for offences against foreign domestic workers. And so along the same line, then we should also include them in the appropriate adult scheme, which is to help vulnerable people during the police interview process. Next week? Next week in Parliament, I'll raise again, and that's also partly due to Parti Liyani, as to whether we can increase the penalties for employers that illegally deploy their workers. Because I think it's a double whammy. One, there's a huge power imbalance, where many of the foreign domestic workers probably won't report their employers. Because obviously when you report, the employer will know, and likely they will terminate the contract. And then if the penalties are so low now, where people just get a warning or a slap on the wrist, I think it's double. Chance of getting caught is low. Even if you get caught, penalties are low. So next week I'll push for higher penalties to make sure that there's a deterrent, that people won't try to illegally deploy their foreign domestic workers. Whether there's systemic issues, obviously there are. I mean, Minister Shanmugam has said that something has gone wrong along the way, and that's why government is doing an entire review of the process now. The Minister will update the House in November, where I'm sure there'll be an active debate about it.
Right. Okay. So there is a question by Alfian.
The migrant workers is why I think it's an important issue, and that's why in my opening speech in Parliament for this term, I spoke on the migrant workers, that we really need to change all the labeling of them as just cleaners or migrant workers. And I shared the stories of my migrant cleaners in Nee Soon East. I followed them to Bangladesh last year, Hanif, to witness the birth of his son and to spend some time with his family, and that really opened my mind and how heartbreaking it was to see Mazibu's daughter, who's this year is 8 years old. She's never met her father, and how many of us are able to go through that kind of experience? And that's why I said again, it's back to the mindset shift. View them not just as cleaners, but as a person. View them for the work they do for us, and show more appreciation for that.
But how do mindset shift? Mindset shift through institutions, right?
So I raised, and that's what I called the House to support. In Nee Soon East, we do events for our cleaners. Every quarter, I bring them out to see a side of Singapore they've never seen. We've gone bowling, we've gone to Kusu Island, we've gone barbecuing East Coast Park, we've gone on a duck tour. The list goes on. It's just to show some appreciation for their work. Right. And then we do joint events. So Hanif was a beautiful example. How often do you get a cleaner hosting a party for our residents? And so we managed to get residents coming together with cleaners to do a barbecue and sort of have an inclusive events where everybody can see the work that each other does. I do posters in Nee Soon East, so at every block there's a poster of me and a cleaner to sort of share his life. So Hanif poster would share about his wife back home in Bangladesh, his son, share about why he's doing this work, trying to feed his entire family. So people sort of view them again, not just as a cleaner, but as a human being, a person as well.
Right.
I think slowly it is starting to work. Every event I have in Nee Soon East, be it Chinese New Year dinner or Hari Raya, I will reserve a table for the cleaners as well. So they get to come and celebrate together with us. It's probably going to take quite some time to change that kind of a mindset, but I think if everyone starts doing it, we will get there.
Right. I think I definitely appreciate what you've done. I think there are some other MPs who have gone out of their way, like Mr. Zainal Sapari, who was dancing with them on stage. I really appreciate all this.
There's one thing I can't do. I cannot dance. Ever.
Yeah,
no sing and dance. I do almost everything except sing and dance.
I think Mr. Zainal couldn't as well, but he was trying as well.
No, I say that's why I draw the line at singing and dancing.
Right. But I mean, I appreciate it. But wouldn't you say these are individual efforts and not institutional ones at the level? And that's why there was an issue with the dormitory. So, are we failing at the institutional level, even with Parti Liyani case? Should we always rely on the magnanimity of individuals rather than legal mechanisms to solve problems? So
we should focus on both. We focus on legislative work. The fight goes on in Parliament, but the fight has to go on the ground as well. So migrant workers is a good example. I mean, I raised the dorm issue a few years ago. I continue to speak up for electronic payment for the migrants. That fight goes on in Parliament, but as I mentioned, then the fight has to go on in my constituency in Nee Soon East, bringing my residents to understand why I show so much appreciation for the work they do. And I'm confident it's changing mindsets. You look at, if you walk around with Hanif, you might think he's the MP for the area. People are smiling, laughing,
Right.
buying, treating him to food. He really has that strong sense of community that he's given to Nee Soon East. And that's beautiful. I want to make sure that we can have that. Where, again, people don't view Hanif as a cleaner. They really view him as his friend. You watch, CNN did a video about him. Residents will invite the cleaner to their house for meals.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
that's
the kind of spirit that I want to make sure that we have. And I think I'm getting there.
Right, sure. And thanks for that. I appreciate it a lot. So there's a question about, and there's a vibrant discussion by Alfian and Daniel on the idea of co-opting activists into the party, but we'll save that for last, as in why you personally joined the party and how does that work. Sure. What about the environment? This is an issue that's close to your heart. But the way I see it, the national discourse often is centered around individual responsibility, and often it's on issues which sometimes may appear more cosmetic than anything else, like plastic straws and metal straws, right? When in the grander scheme of things, not that they don't matter, but they don't matter as much as other things. So do you think there's a problem there, that we are focusing too much on the individuals rather than the corporations or the system?
I think, again, this is multifaceted. And we're doing a little bit or a fair bit in each area. So plastic straws is a good example. Everybody says, oh, my, just one little thing. But I think it's the little things that matter. It starts to get people thinking about, okay, do I need a straw? Or the straw is plastic. Where does it come from? How do we dispose of it? And that starts a conversation which is important on the ground. And on a national level, then we have a whole variety of legislation that we've passed. We've passed the carbon tax, the Carbon Pricing Act, to try and impose carbon tax on the most polluting industries. And of course, there's a whole debate about whether $5 per ton is enough, whether we're increasing it to 10 to 15 is enough.
Right.
I think it's a start. We have the Resource Sustainability Act, which we passed to have the extended producer responsibility, starting with the electronic equipment. So to make sure they think about the life cycle of their product, how they're going to dispose of it when they start to manufacture it. And I think that's extremely important. So right at the start stage of the manufacturing part, people start to think, how much is it going to cost me to dispose of this environment friendly? And that will change the whole ballgame. And I think everything works together then. Then we have activists like the SG Climate Rally that I'm meeting up soon. I've just helped their campaign again on their vision of Singapore SG 2050, if I'm not wrong. But the activists to speak up, to find solutions, co-create solutions. And I think, again, if everybody works together, we'll get somewhere. And of course, I'm planning a private member's motion on climate change. That we're working together with the activists. Just met up with ExxonMobil, trying to get them together. So the extremes. ExxonMobil talking to climate activists. Right. See whether we can find that middle ground and then bring a motion into Parliament to bring all their views in. And then get the debate in Parliament where we can get the House to hopefully pass a motion on the importance of climate change. And that, I hope, will set the stage for changes in policy and even greater emphasis on tackling this as an emergency rather than just climate change, but a real climate emergency.
Right. Do you think our reaction has been reactive as a country more than proactive?
Actually, if you look at the whole ASEAN, we have been the most proactive. I mean, if you look at how we've voluntarily said that we will look into our NDCs to see about our emission levels, all that we've done voluntarily. So even worldwide, we are actually taking the lead, and that's my push for the Singapore government. I do believe as a tiny red dot, we can take the lead on climate change issues and show the way forward. You know, not many countries in ASEAN, if I'm not wrong, have the carbon tax even. We started it. Again, the criticism is why so low, but I think low or high is a good start. And then now, what I'm fighting for now, if you see my speeches, is to increase it. So probably 10 to 15 is not enough. I'm trying to push for a much higher amount and for the increase to be sooner. But at least you have a foundation, a baseline that we have this Carbon Pricing Act now. And then now it's fighting to amend and to make it even better.
Right. Okay. A few people are asking, what about the environmental tax on SIA? Does that make sense? It's within the same philosophy, right?
Absolutely makes sense. And that's what we've just shared in Parliament yesterday, if I'm not wrong.
Right.
The conversation is not new actually. It's already in
Yes.
internationally it's already being debated. But
Right.
now is not a good time. That's what we're saying.
Okay.
Now is not a good time for a lot of things. And I even
Right.
would say now is probably not a good time to increase the carbon tax even. As we mentioned, SIA is barely surviving. I think over 2,000 have lost their jobs. To impose any tax on them now, our national carrier, I think might sink it. And then more jobs to be lost. I don't think that we want that at this point. But
Okay.
once the economy rebounds, I mean, I will be the first to push for all these environmental taxes. And I always do that. But timing is important.
Okay. Okay.
And anyway,
Thank-
SIA responded quite positively.
Yes.
They are not going to do the flights to nowhere. So,
Right. After public pressure, right? That was.
and that I wouldn't know.
Okay. So I just want to go back to what was discussed earlier. Somebody asked about Hanif, and I think the general sense is that people appreciate what you are doing, but then there's a problem also because there's a term community cases and then there's a term dormitory cases, right? As if the foreign workers are not part of a community. Don't you think the language itself? And I agree with the questioner. Don't you
I
think the
agree as well.
language? Okay, so we should
I
change
agree.
the language, right?
Yep.
Right. Okay.
I think language is important. I mean, even the single unweds, I mean, that's what I did
Right.
an adjournment motion for that, and I said the language is terrible. I think when a single unwed finally got a house, I can't remember the exact word, but the government shared with her that on exceptional basis, on a goodwill gesture, we will give you a house.
Right.
I mean, I always say, think
Right,
about how
right,
that
right.
makes someone's feel. So
Right.
yes, we have a house, but think about how it makes people feel. I mean, you think about how the migrant workers feel when they are segregated now. And that's why I always push that we need to welcome them and make sure this becomes their second home. Not their first home, which is back in their home country, but if you look after them well, obviously they'll work better for us. I hate to go down that angle where it is because we want them to work for us well, then we treat them well, but I think there's intrinsic value in making sure our migrants feel more appreciated.
Right. So on the carbon tax, environmental tax for SIA not being the right time, then at the same time there's the electricity tariff that is being increased. That seems like a contradictory signal that's being sent. What are your thoughts on that?
Increase, but you're testing me my knowledge on everything.
No, somebody is asking that. So it's okay.
It's
We don't have to
increase,
that.
but relatively is still lower than as compared to last year, if I'm not wrong. And of course, we have looked at this in your meritocracy debate as well to make sure that we give out the vouchers to those who can't afford, to make sure that we offset this increase.
Alright.
So those who
Okay.
can afford, I mean, our rationale has always been that those who can afford will pay, those who cannot afford, the government will always step in to help. Be it
Right.
your USAVE vouchers or the GST vouchers to make sure that this increase doesn't affect them as compared to those who can afford.
Right. Okay. Thanks. So, Mr. Ng, what about minimum wage? This has been the talk of the town. What's your stance on it?
So actually, I've been pushing for more of looking at this as a PWM versus minimum wage, where actually, I think as SM Taman has said, it really isn't two separate ideas. The progressive work model that we have is like a minimum wage. For example, with the cleaners, I think we've set it at 1,450 this year now.
Right.
And I think the PWM is better because it sets a career path and a progression for the workers. It's targeted as well rather than every sector, and I think that's important. It takes some time to implement, and I think that's again the middle ground so that it gives companies and businesses some time to adjust before the PWM, or let's just say you can call it what you want, whether that 1,450 kicks in. And I think many people are asking, why does PWM take so long? And that really is to be fair to the employers. Cleaners, for example, they've already signed or win a tender because it's awarded and they have that sum, and then if you increase the wages, they might not be able to cover their cost. And so that's why it gives time to factor in them to, when they're new tender, when they bid, they will factor in the PWM as well.
So the ultimate goal for you is minimum wage for all sectors? Is that the ultimate goal, or if this is temporary?
I think that's the easiest way to push things forward, of getting everyone a sum that they can be paid. And I hate this debate of this terminology, whether it's PWM, and yes, I'm a PAP MP, but let's just focus on helping the people. So there's this debate now where there's, I think James mentioned 100,000 people live with a wage below 1,004. And I've been trying to find who are these 100,000 people, and if they're in a certain sector, for example, service sector, then as an individual now, I would push for that sector to get PWM. I realize it's not the service sector because in McDonald's you earn more than 1,004 even. And so I try to look at it that way. If there is, say, I don't know, the landscaping is already in, so let's see which sectors are the one that are affected the most, and then I, as an MP now, I will push for that sector to get PWM. Which I think DPM has now said we are looking to expand the PWM to more sectors already. And I think that then there will be win-win. So rather than debate the terminology of, let's just debate what is this amount that we want Singaporeans to have, and then I'll fight for the different sectors to get that amount. And I think we often forget there's workfare as well. It's just top up the salary for the lower income.
Right. So I think the benefit of pushing for minimum wage is so that people think about the other end of the possibilities, and then eventually it will push people to the center. Right? Even if you don't get there, you get somewhere nearer there.
That's the same as PWM, really.
Right. I think so.
But
I think so, but for all sectors, right? Eventually, wouldn't you say?
So yep, we slowly push PWM to more sectors.
Right. Okay. So
Again,
I think
I look at this as an activist.
Right.
I am a politician, but I'm a politician who is an activist, and I know you have questions for that later. But
yes.
so for me,
that's a good segue. Yeah.
if you tell me there's 100,000 people that live with a wage below 1,004, as an activist, I would say tell me who they are. And the path of least resistance for me is to fight for PWM to extend to this sector so that I can help them. That's the fastest way. I don't want to spend my time fighting on terminology, when actually it's really about the same thing.
Right.
Of course, you're going to have that debate in Parliament between the different people, but I choose to focus on how I can be the most effective in helping this 100,000 people. And by the way, I really don't know who these 100,000 people are.
Right. Okay.
My team is trying to look into it now.
Okay. So you've been in conversation with James as well, Dr. James Lim, or?
We chat in Parliament, yes.
Right. Okay.
We've had a few chats.
All right. Okay. Great. So I don't know where the time went, and also this is the conversation I've had with the most active comment section so far. So there's
you can ask some of the questions that I couldn't.
Sure. So I was
I'm
asking
open to answering
some of them.
Yeah.
I was asking for them as well. So before we get on to the activist one, just one final one on this. What about PWM for foreign workers as well?
Believe it or not, I've pushed for that. If you look at my speeches, I've pushed for it for the cleaners, for example, for the lift technician. Of course, the answer is no, but they would recommend that companies do it. And in fact, I shared Hanif's story in Parliament, saying that they do the same amount of work. Why should we pay them less? And then for the lift technicians, I pushed it as a safety issue, which I still strongly believe. Because a lot of the lift technicians, they do critical work for us. The safety of our lifts are in their hands. And a lot of them are Malaysians. And what I shared in Parliament is I don't want an angry Malaysian lift technician maintaining our lifts. Because he would see, actually, I'm doing the same work as a Singaporean. And then I push this as meritocracy again. But because I'm of a different nationality, they pay me less.
Right.
So ask yourself, how does that make you feel? Will you give 100%, knowing in this dark lift shaft that the guy beside me actually doing the same work but gets paid more? Out of fairness and out of meritocracy, we should pay the same. And PWM is about improving the sector, improving the customer service and all. And if a lot of these sectors, let's face it, the bulk of them, of the workers, are foreigners. How do we uplift the sector if we don't help the people that form the majority of the workforce? And I always said this, it's Team Singapore. Team Singapore includes all of us. I really got quite depressed with all the xenophobic speeches in Parliament, us versus them. And I've always used this quote in Parliament, there is no us or them, only us, one human family connected in ways we sometimes forget. And I think we need to remember that if we draw the line so clearly that Singaporean foreigners, and I might take some flack now for saying all this, I'm not sure whether that's the kind of society I want to bring my 3 daughters up in. I want to bring them in a society where what we started, where there's meritocracy. Hanif does good work for us, we pay him for his good work and not discriminate because he's Bangladeshi and not Singaporean. And I would fight hard to get to that stage.
Right.
And I see some will say, have I fought for it legislatively? I have. The answer is no, and you know me, over the years,
Right.
I will keep repeating the same thing, and this fight will continue. You have my word on that.
Thanks for the assurance, and I have no doubts. You mean what you say. So there's a cheeky question that I think will be the segue to the next section. Do you see
Okay.
yourself splitting from the party and becoming a Tan Cheng Bock? But I think the seriousness of that question is maybe you don't fit into the typical mold of a PAP MP as an activist, right? So why do you choose to join the PAP? Don't you think that's a form of co-optation to have you within, so that you won't do as much damage outside? And then, but surely you have made all these calculations and you think it's wiser to be in. So what were the calculations that, if you don't mind sharing, what was the calculation that you made?
Ken, I mean, I'll share the story, and I think if you look at me in Parliament, do you think I've been co-opted with the kind of things that I raised, and even the last few days? But
Fair enough.
it's a long story, but it really started in 2008. When Minister Shanmugam was the guest of honor at the Acres Gala dinner and
Right.
delivered my speech, came down, sat beside him, and he started that process, that journey of, he asked me, and I always remember that, tell me what obstacles you face, and let's try and work together and within to try and change some things. And quite infamously, he called me to his office and said in that one-liner, all the way to his office, he said that one-liner, Louis, you cannot just help animals, you have to help humans as well. And with that, I was co-opted into his Meet the People session, where I started volunteering there in 2008. And I saw that I could have an impact in not just helping the lives of animals, but the lives of people as well. I saw that through working from within, I could still confront, which is what I've done in Parliament, keep confronting the issues, but not just confront and be confrontational, but to be constructive and to collaborate. And I found that worked. That it could work, effect policy changes a lot more faster than my good old young days of being extremely confrontational, getting a lot of media publicity, but actually very little things done. And that was the turning point for Acres as well in 2008, where we focused a lot more on trying to collaborate. Still, as you know, with Acres, still criticize constructively. Even after I journeyed into politics, I still took on results well, and that fight still continues today. But I found value in starting work at the policy level, and it was Minister Shanmugam that approached me to enter politics, and with the PAP.
Right. So, can I push back a little on the idea that when you were vocal, you didn't achieve much? Don't you think that you need those people so that the ones who are not as vocal, they can be legitimized? So you need people who are more, not extreme, but people who are more confrontational, so that the people who are not as confrontational become the moderates, and then the government has to work with these people. Without those confrontational people, the moderates become the confrontational, because it's all relative, isn't it? Don't you think there is a space for all sorts of activists, as long as you do not advocate violence or treasonous? Don't you think there is a space for all versions of activism?
Absolutely, and I came from that space. I mean, I was deep in that space, and I found value in it, and I still find value in it. I mean, we meet up with a whole wide variety of activists, whether I agree with them or not. Even on some of the issues, whether I agree with them or not, I raise it in Parliament. Because I believe that it's not about what I support or what I agree on. It is people's voices should be heard. And I mean, many people ask me that. Do I agree with everything I raise? Absolutely not. But I feel as an MP, I'm the bridge, not the filter.
Right.
That I should be the bridge for people's voices.
Right.
So am I passionate about some of the issues I've raised? I'm not. I mean, but I think it's important in my role to make sure that these issues where people are marginalized, they get raised. Some of these issues, I mean, I never thought about before I became an MP. I learned along the way, and I realized again that there's this critical need for the vast majority of issues I bring up. Unfortunately, have never been brought up. It's a pity, and that's why I want to make sure that all these different issues, as controversial as even speaking up for sex workers, I would speak up for them in Parliament.
Right.
And that's why I shared the recent story of the sex worker. I mean, given a chance, she's got straight A's in her first semester of diploma. Right. That's something that, again, we should embrace in Singapore. Everybody should have that fair chance.
Right. Thank you. There's just one question on this, based on what you said earlier on Team Singapore, right? And Team Singapore also comprises people who sometimes are critical of of the government, right? So do you think it's time that we move away from personal attacks on people who do not necessarily agree with the government?
We should. Absolutely. And as I said, everybody's view is a good view. There's no such thing as wrong, and I've said that very publicly, that I think we grow not through praise but through criticism. And then that's how I man my social media accounts. I mean, I do it myself. You criticize me, I might even like your comment, because I want you to know that I appreciate that. I don't ban anyone or delete anything, so open. You want to scold me? I know some people find it weird. You like my comment when I scold you? Yeah, why not? And that's what I said in Parliament when I delivered the speech about how some of the public servants maybe fear speaking up.
Right. I remember that. And you were scolded for it, right? Mildly.
Your choice of words, you see, they get me into trouble. But I know this is live. But I was.
Okay, you responded.
I had a reply, and I said that in Parliament, that I would be very happy to be proven wrong. And I think the media always said exactly the question. So you got scolded for speaking up, and I said no. I mean, I did criticize the public service, and then the minister criticized my speech.
Yeah, which is fair game. Yeah, it's fair game. I agree.
I'm 40 over years old now. I can take it. I don't need to go cry in the corner, and that's what debate should be. No hard feelings. I'm good friends with Ikang, and I think we need to put all these personal attacks, personal issues aside, and be there to debate the hard issues. Same with the debate on second-hand smoke. I mean, I push Amy Khor hard, but we still message each other and joke, and still friends. But we're there to make sure. I want to be there to make sure we have the best policies.
Right. Thank you a lot, Mr. Ng. So before you go ahead, I need some advice from you. So who would you recommend I approach that you think would say yes to come on this?
I have no
So I can
idea.
tell them Louis Ng says that you are willing to come. Who would you like to see me have a conversation with? Or
why don't you try with Speaker? I mean, I understudied him, and I think he's open to a lot of these issues. I mean, we work together a fair bit. In fact, I shared the helping migrant workers. It started with Speaker Chuan Jin, and I remember that very clearly when I was volunteering with him. He brought them up
when he was Minister of Manpower, or when?
Yes,
when was
Minister
he?
for Manpower at that time. I remember he brought the cleaners out in his estate for a duck tour.
Right.
We had dinner together. I cannot remember the restaurant now, and I walked around with him, to learn how he does things. And I remember he somehow knew that some of the cleaners were missing, and that's how attentive he was to details. And I remember him sharing with people that when I say everyone has a break and walk together, I mean it. And then he had a separate outing for those that missed this outing, and he joined in as well. And that's why I shared in Parliament. The things I do for migrant workers and what I learned is actually through him. And I saw how he did it, and I wanted to follow his example.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Ng. This was an illuminating conversation, and I hope you continue fighting the good fight and raising the issues that we do in rest. I'm sure you will.
I'm worried about my eye bags, so look at that.
Job hazard.
No, it's from looking at the screen. This is I got one more interview after this.
Oh, really?
It really
Online
is,
as well?
So with a chat with a reporter. But
all right.
I think that's the problem of work from home. It's
Okay.
really bad for your eyes. Man.
Right. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Ng. I'll be uploading this later. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
evening.